Good evening, everyone. Let me know if I need to project anymore. I tend to speak pretty low, but it's an intimate space. I feel like I can do that. I'm delighted that you all have chosen to spend your Friday evening with us, and I know that Krista is too. Is it still raining out there? No. Okay. Well, nevertheless, Friday evening, rain, and you came out on time. We appreciate that.
Yes, all of it.
My name is Sarah Epperson, and I currently serve as the program coordinator for the Center for the Study of Race, Politics, and Culture. I'm also the curator for this exhibition, and I use that term loosely because the reality is Krista and a lot of other people made this incredibly easy to put together, and I'm grateful for their time and energy. I'll say more about that later, but for now, let me just get into the introductions and a little bit about the evening, the program, and the exhibition. On behalf of our director, Michael Dawson, and our associate director, Tracy Matthews, I'd like to welcome you once again to the CSRPC for short. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary and as a part of that programming, we wanted to really activate the space. This is, as I've said, the 20th year of programming and engagement on campus on behalf of the CSRPC. And so this was a moment for us to think critically about the space, about the work that we've done over the past 20 years, and to interact more directly with people that we've worked closely with. Krista being a former artist-in-residence of the Arts and Public Life CSRPC residency program. Like Water is built around Krista's mythological character, Naima Brown, and the legacy of fictional Black women who have come before and after her. Shape-shifting women like those depicted in the novels of Octavia E. Butler. Taking cues from the literal and metaphorical aspects of Franklin's body of work, this exhibition considers the fluid nature of memory, both collective and individual, and the relationship between amorphous ways of being and self-determination. A little bit about Krista Franklin. She's been described as many things: a poet, a performer, a visual artist, the stopper in your bathtub.
I was actually.
But Krista describes herself in the following way, quote, "My work manifests at the intersection of poetics, popular culture, and the dynamic histories of people of color. More specifically, I engage audiences around the fantastic, help me pronounce this, surreality?
Surreality.
Black ritual, and collective memory through collage, paper making, installation, poetry, letterpress, altered bookmaking, and performance. Collage occupies a large space in my work. The appropriation of image and text are, for me, a political gesture where they cut, slice, and chisel away the narratives historically inscribed on women and people of color, and create imaginative space for radical possibilities and visions. We'll create more time and space for Krista to say more later, but for now, I'll just read her bio because it's extensive and deserves voice. Krista Franklin is an interdisciplinary artist whose work floats between the literary and the visual. Her art draws from the well of African diasporic histories, popular culture, personal narrative, folklore, Black spiritualism, ritual, and magic, and the psychic interiority of people of color. She is the recipient of the Propeller Fund and the Albert P. Weisman Award and has held residencies at a studio in the Woods, Cave Common, and the University of Chicago's Arts and Public Life Initiative, and the CSRPC. Her poems and visual work have been published in Black Camera, Coppernickel, Calamoon, Vinyl, Bond Magazine and Encyclopedia, Volume F through K, and I know y'all saw her work on Empire, right? And her chapbook of poems, Study of Love and Black Body, published by Willow Books in 2012. She's the co-curator of the citywide Poetry and Art Initiative, ECFest, a festival of art and word, co-founder of Second Sun Salon, a community meeting space for writers, visual and performance artists, musicians and scholars, and a frequent advocate for creative collaboration. She holds an MFA in interdisciplinary arts with a paper from Columbia College. I've read all of that, but y'all know this.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm on family.
Okay.
I'm on family.
These are your people, so that means that this is going to be a good evening. We're going to start with a reading, a very, very short kind of dialogue between the two of us, and then we'll open it up to the audience. So without further ado, Krista Franklin.
Hey, baby. So, first, I guess I just want to say thank you. Thank you to everybody who came out tonight. You know, it's a dreary Friday night. I'm actually a homebody. I will be at home right now watching television. However, my cable television is like defragging right now. And I have a technician coming tomorrow. And it's like kind of depressing because like what I do is like sit in the house and watch TV all the time. So, you know, when my television started fucking up, I was really depressed. But, you know, the upside is that you guys are here with me and with Dara, and I'm excited about that. So, I also want to say thank you to Dara Epperson. I want to say thank you to Tracy Matthews and the Center for the Study of Race, Politics, and Culture, because you know, them coming to me and saying, you know, we want to do an exhibition of your work. You know, a solo exhibition of your work is, number one, flattering. You know what I mean? Because I crank and crank and crank, and I very rarely think about the body of work as a whole. And so it was nice to have an opportunity for them to take kind of reins over that, to look at the work and Dara cherry picked, you know, what she wanted to show and what she thought was going to be a really cohesive exhibition, and I think she did a beautiful job. So thank you, Dara, very much for that. So I'm gonna read. You know, I'm gonna do curator's choice because Dara asked me to read some excerpts from the narrative of Naima Brown, 2013 narratives of Naima Brown. So I'm gonna read a couple of excerpts from that, and then I'll read some poems too. Just for some context, to bring the written word and the visual work into some kind of focus, right? The majority, a lot of the pieces, the handmade paper pieces that you guys see with the hair in them, were a part of my thesis show. And with my thesis exhibition, what I decided to do was write a science fiction narrative, a speculative fiction narrative, and to create visual art that somehow connected or talked about that narrative, you know, in a visual kind of way. So, so real quick, so, you know, a lot of my work is, of course, a lot of this work is speculative. It's fantastic. It's all about science fiction. It's all about the black female body and like the shifting, you know, that women of color do, that women in general do. You know, it's also rooted in a very real phenomenon. And a lot of you guys know this about me seeing tumbleweed on the streets, you know? So when I was in grad school, you know, I was trying to figure out like what material am I going to use alongside handmade paper, because I was really focused on handmade paper. And I would just, you know, I was walking around, I had just moved to the south side, and I was walking around outside and I would see, you know, tumbleweed on the street, and I would think it was like rats, and I think it was like dead animals, and it kind of freaked me out. And so I began to think about using the hair as a material, and then that's kind of how Naima Brown came to life, you know, because I was really thinking about whose hair is this, you know? Who the hell's hair is this, you know? Who are these girls, like why are y'all just pulling your hair out on the street, you know what I mean, and leaving it for people behind, you know, to see and think it's a dead rat. So that's kind of really the real basic story. So I'm going to read a couple of segments from this story, the 2013 narratives of Naima Brown, and I'm going to set up a little bit of this scene that I'm going to read. So there are many things that are threaded through this narrative. One of the things that I threaded through this narrative are women's names that I know. And so there's a character by the name of Tiana Rosa. Tiana Rosa is Naima's best friend, her childhood friend. And Tiana kind of takes it upon herself to collect this hair off the street and begin to archive it in some way, right? So the archives of the hair paper are Tiana Rosa's doing, right, in the story in some way. But you never really get to that in the story. Tiana Rosa was a student that I had at one time, so her name I took, there's a lot of Latina women who make appearances in this narrative. They're kind of side characters, but the parts of the narrative. And Marita Lucille. Marita is one of my very best friends. Maria Santina. Santina is D. Santina Ruiz, right? So there are names that appear in here. Lucille is Lucille Clifton, right? There are names that appear that are references to either people that I know or literary references to other people. So this is what I'm going to read here is Tiana Rosa, who is Tiana Rosa's narrative along with her grandmother. Tiana Rosa's grandmother, Marita Lucille, was well aware of not only Tiana Rosa's mason stealing jar antics, but also exactly what Naima Brown was. She didn't know immediately, but she always had a hunch. From the first time she laid eyes on Tiana Rosa's best friend, that there was something different about her, something odd. She went on treating Naima Brown like she would any little girl Tiana Rosa would bring home, but she kept one eye open as grown folks are prone to do when their sixth sense starts to tingle. She knew that Naima Brown was no threat. It wasn't that. It was just the nagging sensation that little Miss Naima Brown was more than she appeared to be. Whenever Naima came around, Marita Lucille's cat would start to act a little strange, jumping up in the windowsill to eye Naima Brown when she came into a room. But it wasn't just the cat. Whenever the little girl would drop by to visit Tiana Rosa, Marita Lucille would think about her own paternal great-grandmother, Maria Santina, and the stories the family would whisper about her, that she was special, that she had a secret life, that no one really knew about. That some nights, typically around the full moon, she would disappear, then turn back up a day or two later, looking disheveled and a little worse for the wear. Marita Lucille found those stories about her paternal great-grandmother to be mostly amusing. The tall tales of old biddies who had vivid imaginations and too much time on their hands. But whenever she would laughingly bring the topic up to her father, God rest his soul, his mouth would clam up and become a hard line, and he wouldn't utter a word for at least an hour. Marita Lucille never got to the bottom of it, but she always thought about her whenever Naima Brown came around. That connection came into clear focus the fall Naima Brown turned 17, and the red fox turned up at the back doorstep, staring at the door like a domesticated dog. But it wasn't simply Aunt Coffee's suggestion to be new that propelled Naima into a life of changing. It was more than that. For one, Naima's mother, Alice, had a life that resembled a handsome aircraft in rapid descent. And like most children, Naima played the role of the powerless witness to its downward spiral. What Coffee knew but didn't say was that she knew her sister well and figured that at the core of Naima's lethargy was the vampiric activities of Alice's lifestyle, sucking the very life's blood from her niece's joy. Coffee knew that, like Naima, all she could do was stand by and watch as her sister crash-landed. But at least she could equip Naima with a few tools to survive the aftermath and hopefully evolve into some kind of life of her own. For reasons unknown, Alice didn't possess the power of changing. So there was no way she could impart that knowledge to her daughter, Naima. Coffee did, though. So she took it upon herself to shepherd her niece into her birthright. Coffee would be the midwife to Naima's new birth. So while Coffee and Naima discussed the alchemy of their genealogy on their afternoons together in the summer of Naima's 13th year, Alice flew like a crow from disaster to disaster, searching for herself in one man's bed to another, and floating in the sea of forgetting found in the bottom of bottles of bourbon and tequila. It was a common story, but being so made it no less traumatic for Naima. While other girls' mothers braided their hair and talked to them about boys and took them shopping for new school clothes, Naima spent her mornings throwing away empty bottles and cigarette butts, trying not to wake the dragon, who was Alice, slumbering in an alcohol-infused coma on their broke-down sofa. Some mornings, she held her mother's small makeup mirror under Alice's nose to make sure she was still alive. Naima sometimes imagined her mother as Sleeping Beauty and hoped that one of her mother's numerous paramours would turn out to be Prince Charming, even though she knew princes probably didn't frequent Betty's bar or hang out in Jimmy's cave. 2 years later, Naima would hold herself personally responsible for her mother's permanently comatose state, thinking somehow that her childish envisioning of her mother as Sleeping Beauty manifested her condition, even though Damon was really the one who played the catalyst. I'll read one more section. Damon was, for all intents and purposes, the closest thing that Alice came to a boyfriend. He was anything but stable or ordinary. But as men like Damon go, he was fairly consistent, particularly when a party was involved. And anyone who knew Alice Brown knew that the one thing she loved most was a party. Damon was her partner in crime. Mostly, Naima found Damon to be tolerable. At least she liked him more than any of the other men her mother kept company with. He didn't have too deep of a mean streak, and when he was drunk, his sense of humor was at 10. He made a good party a great one, and Naima could understand why her mother liked him. Besides, he had a nice smile, and when he laughed, his eyes kind of lit up from inside. The downside was that he did a lot of coming and going. You would see him for a while, and then not see him for a while longer. During those not seeing times, Alice became noticeably more sullen and snappish. Naima could always tell when Damon wasn't returning her mother's phone calls. There was a black cloud that seemed to expand around Alice with each passing day. Those were the days that Naima would make herself scarce, hiding out either at Tiana Rosa's or making excuses to be over at Aunt Coffee's place. And really, she didn't need to work too hard to make excuses to be at Aunt Coffee's, since Naima was being tutored in the art of changing anyway. And it was clear that she needed as much practice as she could get. So that's it. So if you want to hear, you can find this. Most of you guys already know this. You can find it online. Me reading the narrative in its entirety of what I have written so far. It was a sound piece, recorded, engineered, and sound curated with J. Jahari Palacio, Perpetual Rebel, was in the house. And so he and I created this sonic soundscape soundtrack to it with the narrative, so you can find it online. It's very easy. So I'm going to read a few poems from Killing Floor. Is that good, Darren? Yeah? Okay. I'll read a few poems from Killing Floor. Killing Floor is a little project that I put together with a good friend of mine from graduate school, Alice is on my brain now. Alice in Wonderland, Alice Coltrane, all the Alices are on my brain. April Sheridan. And April and I put together this collection, my most recent collection, my chapbook of poems called Killing Floor. And Killing Floor is a collection of poems, all the poems that I've written since I've been in Chicago, a lot of the poems I've written since I've been in Chicago. So I'll read Killing Floor, the title poem first, and then read a few more. Killing Floor. There are women who love the taste of their own blood. Most will never say this, or do in hushed voices, whispers that scurry over swept floors like rodents in the dark. We catch glimpses of them from elevator cameras, placed way up high where no one can reach them, nor have the good sense to smash them out. Most of us bash car windows, or the cheeks of men who love us, or claim to. Cameras are too much trouble. Trouble walks on 2 feet with eyes that blaze like shot pistol, and it's often confused for desire, or maybe it is desire, for broken flesh and mashed mouths, for the wetness of tears brushed away by thumbs in the aftermath. Who knows? The unknown is alluring anyway. Identity is incidental. It's better not to know when you have an appetite for crimson, raised voices, and wrestling that masquerades as sex. How many women smack the faces of their rescuers, scream into the fullness of help? No one likes to mention this. It shatters like the mirror against the fist of a beloved, cracks like a tooth after too much midnight. Virgin 1982. This is an older poem, but I wanted to read it tonight. Virgin 1982. In the basement of that house, we were pubescent shadows, little more than libido, really. Underneath one dim bulb in the corner, a red light near the record player, I learned what it meant to be a girl there in the basement of Amy's mother's house. Me, her, a couple of boys from the neighborhood with bulges in their pants, hands murky as swamps. We listened to Journey, Foreigner, Adam and the Ants, danced, our sweat-lodged bodies pressed against each other on the slow songs. The boy I danced with was tall, Ronnie or Rodney or something like that, redhead, I think, but who can remember? I only remember the tight arc of his back bending, his nomad hands imperative, serious. On the sofa, we may or may not have talked. I can only remember the music across the room, the record player, his hands conjuring, smoldering between my thighs, the headiness of girlhood. Foreigner singing, I want to know what love is. For the caves. I'm reading this from my cousin. And it kind of goes along with, this kind of theme of family that is present in Naima Brown. Yeah, this is for my cousins, actually, all of my cousins, my first cousins. For the caves. Bloodlines aren't lines, they're supernovas. This is what I should have sobbed into my pillow and the face of my lover. Instead, I said, we were children together. Through chokes and veins of snot, and the only thing I had to show for it in the morning was a white stain on my hoodie and one eye that throbbed like a star in the afternoon. Fact is, I haven't seen you in decades, a mystery since I was 7, a pair of laughing eyes and hidden hands. Our family wasn't built for boys. The only grandfather we've known knighted you professor, with the same tongue he used to terrorize our mothers. You and your brother both. Pearl-handled pistols our mothers shined and sent off into the world with a Bible verse in your back pocket and razor-sharp wit. All the women love you. Their babies are proof of it. And all the legs that spread with slick talk and twinkle like the crossroad avenues where you made your new names. The ones emblazoned on your necks and biceps, earned with blood and brawl. Don't let this poem fool you. There's no romance here. Only 4 black adults who were children together. 2 jokers with painted on smiles, 2 fast talkers with chop-shop hearts scattered like dice in a craps game. Somewhere in here, there's shame and glory tucked in the ribcage of our mothers, the graves of your fathers, and the sturdy brown legs of your children who move through the streets without us, all our lives unfolding like the letters I have yet to write. I'll read one more. For Dara, Manifesto, or Ars Poetica, number 2. So Manifesto, or Ars Poetica, number 2, is a kind of artist statement. It's an artist statement. It's a collage poem. It includes lines from poems by Wanda Coleman, Aimé Césaire, Amiri Baraka, Tim Siebels, Erica Jean, Lucille Clifton, and myself. It has album titles, movie titles, song titles, book titles, and a quote from Bruce. Manifesto, or Ars Poetica, number 2. Give me the night, you beasts hissing over the face of this dead woman. I climb into your eyes, looking. To those who would sleep through the wounds they inflict on others, I offer pain to help them awaken. Juju, tom-toms, and the magic of a talking burning bush. I am the queen of sleight of hand, wandering the forest of motives, armed with horoscopes, cosmic encounters, and an X-Acto knife. My right eye is a projector, flickering Hottentot and Huey Newton. My left eye is prism of wild style, gold grills, lowriders, black dahlias, blunts, and back alleys. At 21, I stood at the crossroad of hell and here. Evil peering at me behind a blue-red eye, I armed myself with the memories of Pentecostal tent revivals, apple orchards, the strawberry fields I roamed with my mother and aunt in the summer, and the sightings of UFO lights blinking in the black of an Ohio night sky. I am a weapon. I believe in hoodoo, voodoo, root workers, dead presidents, black tail, black inches, and banshees. I believe in the ghosts of 60 million or more, and black bones disintegrating at the bottom of the Atlantic, below sea level, not just knee deep. I believe that children are the future. Love them now, or meet them at dusk at your doorstep. A 9mm in their right hand, and a head noisy as a hornet's nest later. Your choice. Black, still, in the hour of chaos. I believe in royal crown, afro sheen, Vaseline, Jergens, and baby powder on breasts. The collective conscious, cellular memory, public enemies, outlaws, outcasts, elevations, elevators, and Encyclopedia Britannica. Under my knife, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz laughs with Muhammad Ali. A lady named Day cuddles with a boxer named Mr. after traumatically stumbling on strange fruit dangling from one of the most beautiful sycamores ever. Under my knife, Marilyn Monroe enjoys an evening out with Ella Fitzgerald. Meanwhile, life shows me a gigantic photo. I am a weapon. I chart voyages of unlove, high on a man called Crazy who turns nigger into prince. I believe in Jean, Clifton, Dirty Diana, and Dilla, Paper, Skrilla, Green, Gumbo, Coins, Bati Boys, and Video Vixens. I believe that beads at the ends of braids are percussive instruments in double Dutch. In the reflection of my knife, Cab Calloway, Duke Ellington, and Thelonious Monk argue in a Basquiat heroine nod, I am a weapon. I believe in goo-gobs of deep brown apple butter, alphabets, Alaga syrup, Afro-Lachians, assalamu alaikum, walaikum assalam, and African Hebrew Israelites. I believe in octoroons, quadroons, coloreds, coolie high, commodores, crumpin, crunk, and burn, holiday burn. I am Setha, crawling a field toward freedom with a white girl talking about velvet. I believe in tumbleweaves, hot combs and hair lies, Shaka Zulu, Mau Mau, slum village, and balloon mind state. Empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. I believe in water. My body is pulp. I bleed ink. I believe in the fantastic volume 2, low-end theory, space is the place, and the hissing of summer lawns. Tucked in the corner of my right ventricle sprouts a tree of knowledge, lives a shining serpent and a middle finger. I'm on a quest for the marvelous. My face is a mask of malehood, malevolence, one big masquerade. Metaphysically niggerish, I am a weapon, wandering the forest of motives, a machete in one hand, a mirror in the other, searching for the nearest body of water. Thanks, guys.
The truth follows you.
So the food follows. Hi, food.
Which means that we gotta keep this short.
Yeah, I know. We gotta wrap it up, girl. Let's keep it moving.
One more time for Krista. Hi, people. I do it. Hey, people. Your seats up here. Your seats over here. Make yourselves comfortable. Don't feel like you have to stand up. It's very uncomfortable to stand up. Thank you, Krista.
Thank you, dear.
So before I thank Krista more formally, I have a few other thank yous to get out.
Yes.
By the end of this, y'all are gonna think that I talk a lot, but for anybody that knows me, you know that that's not true.
It is not true.
It's not a script that I'm gonna stick to pretty closely. Let me first thank and again acknowledge Tracy Matthews.
Yes.
She couldn't be here tonight. Yes.
Yes.
She couldn't be here. She's in the world feeding her spirit right now, which I'm grateful for. But outside of that, I'm grateful for her just kind of inability to let some things go. She really wanted an exhibition in this space during the fall quarter, and I really did not.
For many reasons.
For many reasons. We have a full programming calendar. I just wanted to get through the fall. But the reality is that she was right. She's always right. And this has proven to be the most fulfilling project, anything that I've seen from beginning to end since starting in this position in January. So thank you, Tracy, for always being right. Quickly, I want to thank Marcus Warren. Marcus is the shop coordinator and exhibitions preparator at the Logan Center. If any of you have been in that space, you know how much they do, which means that Marcus has his hands full all of the time. And he dedicated his time, his energy, what little extra time he had to not only finding the materials for the framing for the work, but actually framing the pieces himself. And he did a beautiful, beautiful job. So thank you, Marcus. David Martin Ferguson, my pseudo exhibitions preparator, my cheerleader, and the love of my life.
Yes.
He spent X number of hours in here with me installing the show with our dog Raven, but he did the heavy work. He did the heavy lifting.
No, not true. I was watching.
Well, mostly I want to thank you for being here tonight, because you could have been with Cecile McLaurin-Salvant, but you chose instead to be here with us. So thank you. And last but never least, Krista Franklin. You are the giver of the best hugs in the world. The best hugs. If you have not received a hug from this woman, please make sure you do so by the end of this. Right?
But you gotta hug me back though. You're gonna be taking shit a lot. Give a little bit. Yeah, they do.
They do.
They do.
Okay.
Yeah. Give.
But you are an inspiration. I find it amazing that we've managed to operate somewhat in the same realm for a long time.
Yes.
We lived in the same apartment complex.
Yes.
And this is the first time that I feel like I've ever truly kind of taken advantage of your beauty, your generosity, and your grace. So thank you for saying yes when we came to you at the last minute about featuring your work, and thank you for just continuing to say yes.
Wow. Thank you.
So I got some questions here, but like I said, the food is in the other room getting cold.
Yeah, we gotta wrap it up.
Right? I know, like, this is a room full of your people and they all have questions.
And they want to eat.
They want to eat. They want to eat. I promise you, there is wine. There will be drinking. Thank you. So I will keep this short. I wanted to ask a very basic question about the formal aspect. Let me. Thank you. He told me in advance, like the wheels are squeaky. I'm not gonna. I didn't listen. All right. I want to ask a little bit about the formal aspects of your work, and in particular what I refer to some of your pieces as paintings, just because the work on this wall in particular, it feels like a painting to me. And the kind of fluid-like quality of both the hair and paper pieces and the collage work. When we first visited your space, I was struck in particular by how this work seemed to just kind of float on the paper, while at the same time it seemed to kind of be submerged. And that obviously points to why we decided to entitle the show Like Water.
Right.
You mentioned water in a lot of your writing.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want you to stick within the formal realm and kind of explain the process of creating these 3, 4, 5 pieces in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Handmade paper that
Yeah.
the pieces exist on, and
Yeah.
you've been kind of weaving
Yeah.
the characters out.
Yeah. It's always kind of weird to talk to people about making paper when they never made it before. You know what I mean? Because, even my mother is like, what are you doing? Like she's like, nobody really gets it. It's somewhat, I consider it to be somewhat antiquated, that people make paper, like we buy paper from the store. That's what we do. So the process is really, it's very fluid. It's very water based. It's a water based process. Like you have I like to call it my hostel. The horror movie Hostel. Mm-hmm. Okay, and that rubber thing. That's like rubber. Like it's all like rubbers.
I'm sorry.
It's like horror movie. I love horror movies. It's a wet process. Like killing people. No, okay. Like horror movies. So it's a wet process, and so. The water, the pulp, and the hair are all in the same space, When I'm pulling sheets of that size, of the size that we're looking at in here, there's kind of a vat of water with the pulp in it, and I put the hair in with all of it, right? So then once you strain it, you strain the water, everything kind of settles. And you have a little bit of a time, just a little bit of really like a lag time, very quick, that you have to get in there and start maneuvering things, because once the water kind of has its own gravity pull to it, it's starting to pull everything into a certain space. So you have to kind of push everything back into the space that you want it to be in. So in that sense, it kind of is like a painting, It is like I'm manipulating, the hair and the pulp to have a consistency of the page, but also for the hair itself to have a form to it, a form of some sort. And some of it is accidental, some of it's haphazard, and some of it is, are what I call beautiful accidents. You know what I mean? Some of them I've dried in the dryer systems, and some of them I've let air dry, and that has a different kind of an effect too, But they do, what's interesting, I feel like, Zira, is that when you put the show together, when you created this show, I saw the work in a different way than I had ever seen it before. Because when you came over, everything was like, anybody that knows me and has been in my career, like, y'all know my work is not precious. It's kind of like everything stacked on top of each other. It's like, oh, let me pull this out, and I'm like pulling it out. She's like, gentle, and I'm like, no, it has to survive me. So it's like, they're like roughly treated. All of my work in my life is roughly treated, roughly loved. So yeah, so that, to see them in this way, in the way that you kind of curated and framed and, positioned them, I saw them in a new way than I ever saw them before. So I do now see them as paintings. I do see them in conversation with each other in a way that I had never really seen before, because they were all stacked up on top of each other like a heap of garbage.
It's funny that you mentioned that, though, because now that the work is framed, this is less apparent, but the pieces are actually really, really delicate. So as Krista is like, whatever, we're all saying, okay, can you not rip?
Yeah, you're like, don't pull it like that.
But I'm curious about what feels like a very labor-intensive process in the making of it, and what ends up being a really delicate, and a fragile product.
Yeah.
And how that kind of dual way of being, of being created and then ending up, but being born from the same thing, how that might inform the character of Naima Brown.
Yeah, well, as a material, paper is first pulp. It's pulp. It's it's just like, it's nothing really. It's cotton that's been chopped up. It's fibers that's been chopped up to like nothing pretty much. And in the sense that I feel like, just on a scientific level, like our bodies are mostly water, I love that kind of metaphor of being in the paper studio and like being surrounded by water and the body kind of being very much water-based. So in that sense, there is a kind of poetic, there's a poetic metaphor, right, of Naima Brown's body being this fluid thing that transforms itself multiple times into whatever she wants to be, Like, in the course of the story, she turns herself into a cat. That's like her first incarnation, and then in my imagination, there are other incarnations that she kind of takes form, right? But the first thing that she decides to turn herself into is a cat, and again, cats are, how they are slinky and kind of fluid, so there's always this kind of notion of fluidity and water in the transformation of her. And then also in the transformation of the pieces, because they're each in their own way symbolic of some kind of form that she's taken on or some kind of form that she's left behind, Paper is, I think paper in general is so strong to me, it's a strong material. Symbolically and metaphorically, we write on paper, we pour ourselves out on paper, like it carries the emotional weight of our lives, journals, anybody that writes in here knows that, you're putting a lot on that paper, and it holds the weight, Handmade paper is different, it's especially depending upon the fiber that you use. Like abaca, a few of these are abaca, which is a plant fiber that's really strong, Like I've tried to tear them before, I've tried to tear them and I've thrown them in the garbage and I've done a lot of really bad things to them before, and they're still tough. They're still pretty tough. So they look more delicate than they are, right? Just like women look more delicate than we are, so there's a lot of metaphor in it.
A lot. I feel like your aesthetic, when it kind of makes itself apparent in the physical realm, is feminine and kind of lacy and delicate, right?
Yes.
But what you're writing about is some real shit.
Yeah, it's rough. It's rough.
I love that actually.
Thank you.
Naima. Not really, but I want to talk a little bit about Aunt Coffee.
Yeah. And
maybe Aunt Coffee wrapped in your own personal narrative.
Yeah.
You have how many aunts?
I have 4. I have 4 kind of significant. Yeah, I have 3 aunts. I have my mother, they're the sisters. We call them the sisters, capital T, capital S. So coffee is a reference to a couple of things. She's a reference in some respects to those women in my life. She's also really a direct reference to Pam Grier. That's where her name came from, Brown, Jackie Brown, Foxy Brown. There are a lot of references that I'm trying to make, toward iconographic archetype women, and in the sense that coffee, Pam Grier's characters, are always transforming into something, like if you watch Foxy Brown, she has to change her outfit like 12 times because she's undercover, right? She has to be a scuba diver. She has to be a reporter. She has to be 12 different women to get to the case of why her brother got strung out on dope. She's on a revenge mission. She is a detective. She has to put on 25 different kinds of outfits. She has to play the role. So I love that idea that she's shape-shifting. Throughout the story, she's being all these different women, right? And so it's who is she really? Who is Coffee? Who is Coffee Brown? Who is Pam Grier? So there's that, and then there's also this kind of underlying tone of, these kind of very powerful women that raised me, that reared me, and had a great influence on shaping my psyche, and shaping the way that I move through the world, I mean, pretty much everybody in here knows because I talk about them nonstop. You know what I mean? They are like these iconic women. You know, they're almost like these mythological beings in their own way, and they've gone through lots of transformations. You know, so like the story of Naima is very much reflective of my own family history, my feminine family history, because they had to go through a lot of trauma to get to where they are, right? So I'm also very interested, like, in the mythological character of the phoenix, right? You know, burning to ash and then coming back out of the flames, you know, whole again. You know what I mean? That's kind of the narrative of the women in my family. You know, very, very dark childhoods, very, very dark. And the fact that, you know, they went from, in 2 generations, and my mother and I talk about this a lot, from abject poverty and orphaning to like me having an idyllic childhood is like miraculous to me. You know, my mother's like, I should be a drunk living in Xenia, Ohio right now. You know what I mean? And she has managed to come out of the, like, the forged, you know, her and her sisters kind of were forged in the flames. You know what I mean? Yeah. And they were like, no, we're actually going to do better. We're going to do better, you know. So there is that, you know, Alice is kind of an interesting character in the story, right, in the narrative, because Alice is kind of me, actually. Really? Like, Alice is me if I had kids. I had kids for a reason. That was deliberate. Because I would be drunk on the couch, chain smoking cigarettes, and my child would be like, is she alive? Like, is she alive? You know what I mean? Like, Alice is kind of me. And she's also Alice in Wonderland, right? Because she falls in the rabbit hole of her body, right? She falls into a coma, which is one of the mysteries of the story. Like, how does this happen? You know? And Naima was kind of on a quest to figure out what's happened to her mother, you know? But her mother is kind of Alice in Wonderland, you know? And I'm kind of Alice in Wonderland. Like, if there was a white rabbit right now, I would straight up, I would be like, bye. There's a white rabbit, you know what I mean? Like, I would go after the white rabbit, you know what I mean? To my peril, of course, you know what I mean? But, yeah, to my ultimate demise. But I would have fun. I'd be drinking tea, you know, dancing, girl, you know what I mean? Running away, you know, from the crazy, with, you know, clean. Yeah, I'd be doing all that, you know? So yeah, the way, in that sense, that Alice is me, and she's also like representative of this ideal of what the women in my family could have been had they taken different routes, you know? Right. And coffee is, you know, the epitome of the aunt who trains you to be, right? My Aunt Sue, for example, she like etiquette classes.
Is that why your back is
Yeah, that's why, I mean, she taught me how to walk with a book on my head, like all that. Like, she was like for real, you know? She's like, it was like Vogue magazine every September, Virgo. Vogue magazine every September. We had to look at the September issue of Vogue. We had to flip through the fashions for the year, you know? It was very much about like, you have to be this kind of girl, you know? And I'm gonna train you to do that. Right? You know, we were raised in an orphanage, but you're going to learn how to eat you're going to know what fork to use at the table. You're going to learn how to put a napkin on, you know what I mean? You're going to clean your dirty little mouth up. Do you know what I mean? You're going to act like you have some sense. You know, and that's coffee too, right, in the story. Like, that's my aunt too. You know, the trainer. This is how you shapeshift. This is how you transform yourself to be just an ordinary black girl to an extraordinary human being. You know what I mean?
Okay. I kind of feel like I shouldn't even ask the last question because the audience is given, right? Maybe I'll jump in, but do you, Felicia? You got your Felicia?
Yes, I am just, you know, I don't have a question. I just am so excited to see this collaboration right here. 2 of my favorites in one fantastic project, and also just to comment as well, you know, life bringing of Naima Brown. I'm so happy to see it continuing.
Yes.
And her chronicles, I mean, because that's
They
who
are
she
chronicles,
is.
yeah.
And again, I'm just so excited to see this collaboration. So kudos to both of you. Okay, so there's one point in the conversation where your voice really inflected on, I ripped them up and I throw them in the garbage.
Yeah.
You really were very, very excited about that.
Yeah. That's so funny because we were just talking about that earlier, right? How excited I am about throwing something
Yeah.
away.
We're a little mad about that, but
Yeah.
that's okay.
But I wanted to ask, just with the ripping up and the throwing them away, oftentimes, I just wanted to say for you, when we throw different art away or throw different parts, does that represent a part of you that you need to throw it away in order to rebirth yourself? And in a sense, and does that represent maybe like just a part of, are you like saying like, okay, I'm rebirthing this part of Krista?
That's right. That's a good question. No.
Okay.
It's a good question though, you know. Like, and it's funny because as a teacher, as an instructor, especially, you know, of poetry, you know, I always say don't throw anything away. You know, like even your worst drafts, like don't throw them away, you know. I produce like a machine. Not the writing as much anymore, but I produce visual art very much like a machine. So a lot of things that I make that are visual they're just exercises for me, or they're a way to get to a particular destination. And so they don't have as much significance or meaning to me. And I also, you know, like any other artist, you know, I get frustrated that when the work is around for too long, when it's around me for too long. And so I'm just like, I just go through fits where I'm like, I'm throwing everything in the garbage. Do you know what I mean? You know, people have literally rescued, there are people in this room who have rescued like artwork that I was like on the way to the dumpster with. You know what I mean? They're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, throwing it in the garbage. And they're like, yeah, no, I'm gonna go ahead and take that off your hands. You know what I mean? Because I don't want to deal with it. You know what I mean? I don't want to carry it around. I don't want to look at it anymore, or it just didn't have the resonance that some of the other pieces have. Yeah, and so I'm like clearing the space so that I can, you know, have new room to think in a way. So maybe yes and no to your question, you know. But yeah, I don't really. There the things that I'm emotionally attached to. That's what I keep around. You know, and I'm a Cancer, so I keep a lot of. Trust me, there's plenty that I still have. I could throw a whole dumpster's worth of work away and still would be like hella work. You know, yeah, that's a good question.
Thank you.
This is a three-parter.
Okay.
No, there's only one question, but this is going to come in
Okay.
3 parts. All right, the first part is thank you for being the trillist.
Thank you.
We need that.
Thank
We need it.
you. Sometimes burn.
No, but it's all phoenixing. It's
Yeah, it
all
is
coming from the
phoenixing.
ashes. So
It is.
thank you for being the trillist.
Thank you.
That's part 1. Part 2 is not only thank you for being the trillist, but thank you for being the trillist magnet. Because I was looking around this room, and the women of color in particular, I'm partial, obviously, in this room is just like fire.
Yes.
So thanks for the reunions.
Yes.
So you're a magnet for the trillist as well. That's how strong your magnetism of trillness is.
Yeah.
But the third part
I love that.
is an actual question about your art.
Okay.
So you are super prolific. I've noticed that, and your work does feel like a meditation to me around like an octagonal die, like looking at every side. But one of the things that I noticed throughout your expressions, that's really your dynamism, is there's always a culture of sound, a culture of language. Sometimes language and sound together, and then like a material culture.
Yeah.
And it's always different. How does that work inside you? Like, how does that manifest? Because sometimes you get down with a soundscape and something material.
Right.
Sometimes it's like it's multimedia and then also text.
Yeah.
I'm always just fascinated by people who have a grip, like a real aesthetic around each. Because I feel like you could just vibe with one and it would be cool, and I could just see that. So how does that manifest for you?
Well, I kind of have intellectual and creative ADHD. You know what I mean? So I have these really interesting conversations with Tempest recently, where she'll be over watching television and we'll be kicking, and I'll be like, so that person is, and I'll like start talking about the actor that's performing and the movies that they were in, and you know, so like there's so many interests that I have, you know, and that sometimes you have to decide what's the best medium to address that. You know what I mean? Collage is easy for me because I can steal from a whole bunch of different places to create a new world, you know? And collage, I came to collage as a kind of necessity because I'm not the best drawer, you know? So I wanted like things to look exactly the way that I wanted them to look. And I wasn't able to draw things as, you know, realistically as I wanted. So it became this notion of trying to create the perfect picture, you know? You know, the hand and paper, again, it's more meditative, you know? It's more about, I am playing around a lot with the material in terms of the natural world and the synthetic world, and the blending of those two, the hybridization, which is another kind of collage to me in a weird way. But I have a lot of different interests. You know, I'm interested in a lot of stuff. Music is the undercurrent of almost everything that I do. And sound, you're right, and rhythm. You know, like even in the poetry, I'm like aspiring to a kind of sonic and rhythmic thing. Sometimes it's even less about what I'm saying and more about the sonic resonance that I want you to feel, like this vibration inside your body, you know, when I'm reading. Or when you read it out loud to yourself, I'm trying to hit like a certain sonic vibrations, you know. I probably should have been a musician, but I didn't have the discipline. You know. So I mean, you know, again, I don't have the discipline to like stick with one thing. You know, I just don't. I want to experiment with a lot of stuff. It has come. I do think it's something though to be really transparent in a room full of in a room full of people that I love. I think it's something that's kind of blocked me in some ways from being to get as high as I want to get, because you know the art world likes things to be the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. They want you to stay on the same thing for a really long time, and that's when they pay attention to you. Oh, you've done that 2,000,000 times. That's amazing. We love it. You have replicated the same million times. That is amazing. I'm going to give you the Genius Award because you stayed on the same thing for 20 years. And so it comes back to bite me in the ass. You know what I'm saying? Because people are like, what did you do again? And I'm like, I make collages, I make paper, I write poems, I perform sometimes, you know what I mean? Like, you know, I don't know what I do. You know. Yeah, there is you really helped me to see that. Like other people, but see to me that's the beauty of like arts administrators, curators, right? Is that you all can identify the thread, you can articulate the thread, right, and framework it. Where the artist is just kind of in their own spiral. You know what I mean? So you showed me that. Like you were the one to be like, you know, boop, 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 boop. See water, and I was like, water. I was like, what is yeah. You know, but it took you to say that, right? For you to identify that, and I was like, oh yeah, you know, because they were all like in a heap. Yeah.
I just want to go back to the sonic element to your work, and also I think movement and motion is also a really key component in understanding both your visual art, but also like conceptually the way that you're building with your writing, right? And how I really appreciate both of those aspects of like active participation, either via reading aloud, listening to you read aloud, right? Maybe it is that we are, visually being guided, with the hair in your paperworks as well. I think there's a large quality of movement and motion in both aspects of those, and how important it is. I've been on this for a minute now, thinking about sound especially, and movement especially, and how there really isn't academically a lot of conversation around bringing how sound and motion are really important to understanding this certain part of language for Black makers and Black creatives.
Yeah.
I think that if someone were to read your poems and not reading it aloud, right? Like you're not getting it. You're not, there's something, a piece that you're not quite accessing.
Yeah.
And I think that it takes also maybe a particular type of reader to be able to access that to begin with, perhaps, which I think is really interesting and really, I don't know, there's something to be said about that. Particularly, I'm thinking a lot about Fred Moten's In the Break, where he's talking about sort of the Black radical tradition through the sonic, through sound. I'm thinking a lot about Robert Farris Thompson's African Art in Motion, and how dance and movement is a giant part to being able to understand sort of traditional African art that came from the continent. And I see that a lot with both your writing and your visual art. And I just want to say, like, thank you for including that sort of complexity in your work, because I think that it's, it's really important, and it takes risk, and it takes guts, and it takes a badass woman like you to be able to do it and do it successfully. So, yeah.
I want to say one thing to that. As you were talking about all of that, which is all heavy stuff, heavy intellectual stuff, But I was thinking about myself in the paper studio, and there's a lot of movement. You've been in the paper studio with me before, so you know like how much movement there is. Like there would be nights that I would leave the paper studio that I would have to take an aspirin and lay down. I had to take like 12 Tylenol. Because it's very rigorous, it's labor-intensive work, like the water is heavy, there's kind of a dance that you're doing, so there is a lot of movement even in that, and that's one thing I feel like, that's the thing that I see, you know what I'm saying, that's the experience that I have, because what the viewer gets is the finished product of me doing this kind of tango, you know what I mean, with water and pulp and hair and whatever else I decide to kind of throw in the mix, But it's very labor intensive, it's strenuous, and it's sometimes backbreaking, It seems, and that's the thing with I guess the trick of it, right, is that it does look like all delicate and fragile, right? But it's just like, it makes you work. It makes you work for that delicacy. It makes you work for that translucency. It makes you work for that, And I love that about the process of that kind of dance.
And the other thing that I was just thinking about while you were talking about that process from being in the studio with you is you do like to play music.
I play music all the time, and I dance actually a lot. I'm dancing when I'm making work.
There's a response.
A lot of times, yeah. A lot of this work, the soundtrack for a lot of this work was Kanye West's My Beautiful Twisted Dark Fantasy. Like that was like I played it on repeat while I made this work. You know what I mean? And I would be dancing, I'd be like, easy talking. Like I'm waiting for it to drain, you know what I mean? I'm like, like totally dancing and trying not to slip and like bust my behind because the whole floor is wet.
What do you say? Do we have any more questions? I just want to eat.
Yeah.
Dance a little bit?
They just want to eat. They want to eat and dance and drink. Absolutely. It's Friday night.
Can I just thank you all once
Yeah,
again
thank you guys
for
a
being
lot.
here? Yeah.
Lovely.